Hi, ladies. Our roundtable discussion topic today is rape in intimate relationships. It's a real heady topic. Let's introduce ourselves first. I'm Ann Sharpstein, author of the best-selling book, How to Leave an Asshole, a Practical Guide on Heal from a Toxic Relationship. I'm a keynote speaker and founder of the 6-Step Reset Method. Karen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Karen Jones, author and founder of the Happy You, Happy Body Method, keynote speaker, and I'm really pleased to be here today. Snetha.
And Snetha.
Hi, okay, I am Snetha Badhan. I am a keynote speaker for Surviving the Narcissistic Ex-Partner, and I am also a counsellor, and it is an honour to be here today as well.
And I guess we should mention, ladies, how we all met. We all met as keynote speakers over in the UK. Do one of you want to explain how that came about and the group that brought us together?
I Surviving the Ex-Narcissist all in Newcastle. And it was the first time that I'd met Snetha. It was the first time that I met Anne from the US, and Anne had come over to do a book launch of How to Leave an Asshole. So it was an amazing, Surviving the Ex-Narcissist was the talk that we were part of, and it was just an honour to be able to be there to share my story, and the other ladies were there too. So yeah, it was really cool. And that was 18 months ago?
Yeah.
So, and we just knew
it was over 2 years ago.
No way.
I
mean, I said 2 years, but yeah.
Was it?
So 18
well,
months.
Anyway. And Snetha, meeting you two are a huge blessing in my life. And we've all been through similar experiences and have bonded. And anyway, I'm just so blessed to have the both of you in my life.
I'm blessed to have you both in my life too. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to look at this topic of rape in intimate relationships through the lens of an article we decided, right? I mean, we found this article, one of you, Snetha, did you find it? One of us, as we do, we share articles among the three of us. This article that we're going to examine this topic through the lens of was written by Dr. Marie Hartwell Walker. She is a licensed psychologist and marriage and family counselor, and she writes regularly for Psych Central, but she also writes this Ask the Therapist column, and I believe that's what inspired her to address this topic of marital rape and forced sex. And because of the letters that she had received. So the three of us routinely share articles and we discuss them amongst ourselves. And this one seemed to resonate with all three of us on such a deep level that we thought it would make an interesting roundtable topic. And perhaps mainly because we know it's a topic that is not discussed routinely, and it probably should be. So we won't read the entire article verbatim here. We're going to link to that below where listeners can go and read it for themselves. But in the article, Dr. Hartwell Walker shares 6 different examples of non-consensual sex that some people may or may not be surprised to realize are rape within the setting of an intimate relationship. And the first example, I'll take the first example, ladies. The first example of non-consensual sex she gives is, number 1, forced sex. And, this is what most people believe rape is. And in her article, she says, it's when a husband holds down his wife, pushes her, imposes sex forcefully by hurting her, that is rape. And that is what most people believe, I believe, is the definition of rape, is, forcibly pushing a woman down, her saying, no, 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 and then he has sex with her. And Snetha, you shared a post from a therapist a week or so ago that was so fascinating. And this therapist was talking about interacting with her clients. And she said, I don't ask a client if her husband rapes her because she will say no. Instead, this therapist asks her clients if they have ever been forced to have sex or she feels like she can't say no. And then she said, something to the effect of, and routinely women will say, well, sometimes, and that brings this out.
Exactly.
And so I think even though this first example of non-consensual sex is sort of what everyone thinks of rape, I think that's why this article and her 5 other examples of non-consensual sex or i.e. rape are so important to discuss, because not all forms of force are physical, like this first example that I shared. So, it doesn't have to be use of a weapon or threats. It can be coercion. And so I think these other 5, the first one is sort of the obvious form of rape in the setting of intimate relationships. But these other 5, as we deep dive into them, I think are very eye-opening. Snetha, do you want to take the example she offers up?
Very much. Yep, thank you. So the next point she highlights is sex when the wife or partner feels threatened. So these threats could look different in each relationship. It could be that he comes to her quite domineering in a rage. And again, he wouldn't necessarily be attacking her, but his whole presence is very aggressive. It could be that he threatens to harm her or harm people she loves or things that she cares about. And that puts someone in a position to comply. So a lot of people could say, oh, I just had to do it then. There was no choice. I just gave in. But it's basically when they just literally comply, which is actually somewhat of a response. Excuse me. It's a trauma response. So it's almost like freezing, if you want to look at it that way as well. And this can happen quite frequently. And the person who's being raped, unfortunately, it can feel quite normal that is actually going on. And it's actually really heartbreaking to hear so many people experience this and they haven't really got a clue that it's rape, that they haven't given consent. They are coerced into it. So that's the second example. And but if you'd like to add more, feel free.
I think it's interesting to note that some people think that if you're married, for example, that rape doesn't ever happen in the state of marriage once you're married or once you're intimately involved, that happens with strangers. And so I think that's probably, if you feel threatened, whether it's someone who you've been in a relationship with and you've had sex consensually before, but if anything turns and you are feeling threatened, that is, it can be rape.
Yeah, exactly that. So, I mean, it's part of the controlling coercive behavior. So it will start off easy. The perpetrator will be checking where the boundaries are and how to push them. And especially with the emotional abuse, because they would have already started putting them down, lowering their self-esteem, making them feel bad, all these sort of things put together. And everything that's going on outside of that relationship will happen in the intimate part too. So you put all that together, that unfortunately the victim has such low self-esteem, and they do have to comply because they will get punished. Now, one of the lines that we hear quite often said by perpetrators is that the more sex, we know that's actually rape, that the partner gives them, the better they will treat them. So they're led to believe that once they give in and comply, they will be treated better. But we know that this is actually another form of their control and coercion and their abusive tactics. So it's quite sad that people have to experience that.
And also the fact that being married does not give automatic rights to the husband to have sex with you whenever they want. That's not how it works. So yeah, the woman still has a right. Just because she's married, it doesn't mean that she has to have sex with her husband whenever he feels like it. It's, in a loving relationship, that's not how sex works. You know, it's about both wanting to have consensual, loving sex. So yeah.
Right. Karen, do you want to take the third one?
Yeah, I've gone for the sex by manipulation. So if a husband calls his wife names, accuses her of not being a good wife, or blackmails her emotionally by suggesting she's so bad in bed that he will go elsewhere, he's manipulating her. Some men even threaten to leave and take the children with him if their wives don't comply for demands of sex. And when a wife falls for these tactics, it isn't consent, it's rape. So
I think it's interesting where women, who experience the things that you just talked about and mentioned, that they may think in their own head, well, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and be coerced into this and I'm not going to say no. And so therefore it's not rape, but it is. I think this article, correct me if I'm wrong, is saying that if you're coerced in this via manipulation and you're not consenting, you're being coerced, that's still rape, which is very surprising, I think, to some people.
Yeah, I think it's where the woman as well just doesn't feel like she's got a choice. You know, she doesn't do it, something bad will happen to her as a consequence of not complying to have sex with her husband or an intimate partner, because it's not just about it's not just marriage, and you don't have to just be living with each other. I believe it can be it's intimate partner. So that's somebody that you're having a relationship with, also someone you're living with, and someone you're married or can be married to. It doesn't give anyone the right to have sex with you if it's against your will or it's non-consensual.
Right.
Yeah. But you just wouldn't, I just think that so many women just don't understand or don't realise that is the case, that they are being raped.
Well, I know so many examples of women who, you're exactly right, Karen, that it takes them going to a counselor and the counselor pointing out to them, or it takes talking to a police officer to find out that it's rape, and they're surprised. I mean, I know of one woman who always referred to her abuser as he would be bad, and he would, which means an episode, or would rape her, and then he would be good for a period of time, and then he would be bad again, and never use the word rape until she got into the setting of a therapist and working it out, and then being able to call it what it was.
Yeah, that's right. It's I mean, just reflecting back on what Karen just read, there's also gaslighting in there. So if anyone's unsure about what gaslighting is, it's a form of manipulation where they're going to make you think differently from your own experience. So it's mental manipulation. But just the fact that the partner could say, you're not good in bed. Well, she or he could be perfectly good in bed and make a lot of effort and, those sort of things. But they'll continuously say to them about how not good in bed they are. So they're actually manipulating their thinking to think, oh gosh, I'm really bad at this. So it includes gaslighting in this whole situation too. And again, it's another way to bring down the person's self-esteem and dominate that person and have control. But yeah, sadly, gaslighting is a big part of it as well. And even denying it. That's the thing, but I'll wait for that one. Let me come back to that one, ladies, when I go and speak about the other point, because gaslighting will be part of that too. Yeah.
So I think, and I was reading as we were researching for this roundtable discussion, I read somewhere that, consent is unambiguous. It's like quite abundantly clear that you're consenting to the sex, wholeheartedly, 100%. And so if you're crying, if you feel threatened, if you're worried about, if you've been manipulated, anything, if you're forced to submit, or if you submit and are silent, that's not consent. Silence does not constitute consent. And I think a lot of people think that unless you're screaming, no, 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 and unless you're, trying to run away, that it couldn't possibly be rape. And it is, because of these things, the manipulation and, feeling threatened, even though, because, if you're in an abusive situation, that this person is a ticking time bomb, and you just live for those good time, for the good times to come back, for the pendulum to swing from bad back to good, because abusive relationships, maybe a lot of people who haven't experienced them, at times during abusive relationships, it's not always bad. And I think that's what causes the trauma bond, is trying to get back to that stable, good period. And in reality, and it ends up being, there's good and then bad and then good and then bad. And you desperately want to get back to the good. And that's why you stay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that trauma bond is very intense during intimate points as well. So even though technically this is all rape, but this is also to keep the victim hooked on the perpetrator intimately. So it is pretty heartbreaking knowing that there's rape actually going on, but it's also part of their tactic with the trauma bonding and creating cognitive dissonance. So your mind's tricking itself as well, because you're having that reward and punishment thing going with the pendulum. So again, it's further entrapment, and this is where people feel absolutely stuck and confused. They're in a very, very confused state because they feel within themselves that this is wrong. They aren't actually giving consent. Are we okay that I could go on to the next one? Because I think this kind of goes into that.
I guess just to recap, so we've talked about 3 examples of non-consensual sex: forced sex, sex when the wife, and we say wife, but it could, I guess this is from the perspective, this writer wrote this article. Number 2 is sex when the wife feels threatened. Number 3, sex by manipulation. And Snetha, let's go over the 4th one.
Number 4, and this is sex when the wife or partner cannot give consent. So this one is somewhat straightforward, but it's just as damaging. So when they cannot literally give consent is when the partner is sleeping, when they're on medication, some form of drugs, where they're not quite as alert as they used to be or are, and if they're generally intoxicated, so it could be alcohol or any other form of drugs. So this is also a time where the perpetrator will use it to their advantage. So the clear ones is obviously alcohol and drugs. And they will take advantage of the partner that at that time, and they can't fully give consent. Now, it could start off quite playful, like earlier on in the relationship, it could be quite fun, but that will turn very ugly when it's going to turn like that. And then they will know that when that partner's intoxicated in any way, they can take advantage of them and rape them. But what I will also add is that many people that are going through abuse do unfortunately turn to, I guess, self-medication, if you want to call it that. So people can end up drinking more, can end up on, having drugs because they just don't find any way out. So again, this is where the perpetrator will take advantage. So going on to the bit where the person would be asleep. See, this is where the mind games work, and this is where gaslighting works as well. So this is where the perpetrator could say initially that they don't mind if you want to initiate sex while they're asleep. So they'll put it onto them. But what they're indirectly doing is kind of setting you up, that eventually that will turn, that they will keep going on to you to initiate that sex in the night, but you're obviously fast asleep. And they will continue to push it until they get what they want, which is sex, and that's rape. And it gets to points where the victim, unfortunately, is going to be suffering from exhaustion because they do wear you down. They could be finding other tactics to make them exhausted that would interfere with their sleep. And they will use sex, the rape, as a way to cause further sleep deprivation. So it's all sort of twined in together in how they're doing it. And it's extremely disturbing, because while it's actually going on, the person's, the victims are just, they're just stuck in it. It's happening and it's not healthy and it's scary, but they're literally stuck in it. So that's my perception of rape while the person's asleep. So you can add to that if you want, ladies, as well.
Only that
and,
I just know that a lot of people won't talk about it. They won't like talk to friends and family about it, because sex is a very intimate thing. Making love to your partner, you don't generally have conversations about it, and especially when you're feeling like something is going on, and you just, sometimes women can't even articulate. They can't even kind of put it into context or into words, because they know in their head that it's not right, but they think that other people might judge them, or they're just, it's just a topic that I know a lot of women would not talk about, not openly.
I think you're right. And I think it's for different reasons. Either people will say, but you're married to that person, so it can't be what you're saying it is, or, or what were you wearing, or were you drinking? Did you have a couple drinks, when this thing happened? Or so they're always looking for, I guess evidence of that it didn't happen. And
that spins right into victim blaming. All of that is absolute, it's unacceptable, really, that is victim blaming. They'll find reason to blame the person rather than see the truth for what it is. So yeah.
I mean, I hope the times are going to change where someday we're not having to talk about, these things, and that it is accepted and women are believed. And I mean, it was just less than 100 years ago that in the US anyway, that, they had laws that governed, husbands were allowed to beat their wives, and they were allowed to do that. So there weren't any laws prohibiting a husband from beating their wife, but there were laws about how large of an object, you could use when you beat your wife, which is crazy. And that's less than 100 years ago. I mean, that's not very long ago. So I just hope and pray that the laws, and that women, having to go and testify about rape and then be mocked and belittled because of it, I hope all that changes someday, because it's just wrong.
I think the law came in the UK in 1992 for marital rape, and I think not, and also living with a partner. I'm not so sure about the intimate partner, but just that, just living with the partner.
I guess the controlling coercive behaviour law that came in only in 2015, I believe that would cover relationships where they're not they're not living together, but they're in an intimate relationship. They don't have to be married. But that also covers sexual abuse as well. I believe so. But again, it's that same perception that legal persons can have, or just the point of the first bullet point, forced sex. They just assume it's got to be this heavy physical form of forced sex, which is rape. So they won't necessarily be educated enough to understand that there's so many levels of it, that if anything, a victim, unfortunately, could have actually been getting raped for the entire time and never knew it, because most of that relationship was like that. So yeah, so it's 2015, I believe, anyway.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, if anybody wants to know more, then obviously you can go onto Google and just Google, the laws in each country, because obviously in England it's going to be slightly different from America. And this article was written in America, but yet, me and Snetha are both from the UK. So different laws, different countries. So yeah, just read up on the laws if you need to know.
So I'll take on the fifth one.
Yep.
So the fifth one that she mentions in the article is sex by taking a woman hostage. This one really hit home. So I'm going to read what she says in the article. she says, some men keep themselves in a position of superiority by controlling all the money, by making contact with friends and family difficult or impossible, or by making sure that there's no way for her to get transportation out of the house. This woman becomes a hostage in her own home, or I think in the relationship. And like many hostages, the writer continues, she gives up and gives in to whatever he wants, including sex. And I guess this gets back to what I believe: silence does not constitute consent. If you are being held hostage and you, in one of these ways, financially, or because there are lots of ways to hold a woman hostage, right? There's financially, which we know is prevalent with abusers. There's isolating a woman from friends and family. Typically women who experience abuse find themselves in a position where they don't see their friends and family very much. And that's encouraged because the abuser could even paint this picture of, it's you and me against the world, and maybe even using those exact words. So he sort of creates this, insulated relationship, and I think that's a major, major red flag that plays out in a lot of abusive relationships. But the bottom line is that financially, you don't, you can't feel like you can't say anything because you're dependent on the man or the husband or the boyfriend, fiance, whatever. And you're isolated from your support system who you might be able to help you in that situation. And so you just submit without consent because you're trapped, you're stuck. And I think what's that?
You just feel like you don't have a choice in the matter.
And you know what?
Again,
they don't.
No. No, they don't. I mean, they can move people into different locations. It could just be a simple thing like a trip, and then those abusive patterns will come out. But taking hostage is also your mental space. If that makes sense. Like, they will speak down to you for hours and hours and hours, and then right at the end they will demand sex. But again, I use the word demand, but it's not, doesn't have to be a forceful demand. It's just the fact that you're so, exhausted in that hostage sort of situation. So, but yeah, it will look very different depending on the circumstance, depends what's going on, how much they could actually do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for some reason, I just had this image where the three of us are moms, right? So we've had young little ones at some point. And remember how sometimes, we were generally disciplinarians, and we were good moms, and we enforced, teaching our children, good behaviors and everything. But if we're going to be honest, there were moments when the behavior was so bad, that you finally okay, you can have that lollipop or that candy, whatever, just go, just do it. So I think that we have, there are times when women, and it's not a laughing matter. I shouldn't be laughing about it, because I think that this fifth example of non-consensual sex is probably huge as far the numbers of women who are or people who are affected by that kind of non-consensual sex. I would predict the numbers are just enormous.
Well, the numbers are, because people wouldn't have had a clue. We hope that once people listen to this, they get a much stronger understanding of it. But spinning off from what you just said there about a young child and us being mums, and so as mums, you do spend a lot of time with your children, and you're committed to parenting. But obviously children push your boundaries, and they push it, and you give in. But what we need to remember, that these perpetrators, especially those that are pathologically narcissistic, they're stuck in a very young mental age. So they are actually having a tantrum. They're actually having a tantrum, and they're pushing boundaries just like a toddler would, because they're literally stuck. Their mindset, the way they're going to have these things to fulfill their own need, which is a very, very nasty need, obviously, because it's rape. But yeah, it really does make me think about that they're actually stuck in that mental age in the first place. So thank you for bringing that up, Anne, because it made me think.
Yeah, I think that they feel entitled is the word, isn't it? They feel entitled to their needs being met, and that's that really. You just don't. It seems like you don't have a choice in that matter of just learning to comply.
Mm.
And you know, I think this is I just learned recently about paraphilia. And we discussed it among the three of us. And Karen, I don't know if you knew what it was, but I think in some of these instances, like taking a woman sort of hostage, you know, and financially and making her feel threatened and manipulated, I think that there are sometimes other instances of conditions, I guess, that men have, where it encourages them or kind of causes them to exhibit this behavior, which is threatening and leads to rape. Do you want to, Snetha, do you want to explain what paraphilia is?
Yeah, I mean, I came across it through my own research. So this is just my understanding, of course. My understanding of paraphilias is that it's a spectrum of unhealthy sexual behaviors. Now, there is a light side of it. So there are types of paraphilias that both people can consent to. So you could talk about things like, I don't know, the bondage type, but they both have to give consent. But then there's the harder side of this side about this topic, about the paraphilias where the other person does not give consent. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about rape. Now, the worst side of the spectrum is things like paedophilia and necrophilia. So there is an extremity to it. But from my understanding of it, I feel like that lots of these perpetrators, because they are so covert, they don't want people to know that they are mentally unstable, they have a personality disorder, and so on and so forth. So they are going to fulfill these paraphilias covertly. This is what we're actually talking about. From anything to make the partner cry and to get sexually aroused from making them cry, and then almost acting out a scene that it looks like a full-on rape attack. Because if you think of rape, unfortunately, where someone's attacked, the person's going to be scared, shaking, crying. You know, they're frozen, they can't even fight out. So it's almost like they're making that scene happen, but with their intimate partner. And they will get aroused by this, and they love the dominance and the power to it as well. It's not good. It is not healthy, and it is abuse, and that's what people need to start to understand. And what worries me also is that where a person will rape the victim through sleep, for me, isn't that a direct connection to necrophilia? That person's asleep, they're unconscious or intoxicated, they can't respond. So there is actually quite a big worry there as well, that, you know, how damaged are these perpetrators? Which part of the spectrum are they on? You know, so yeah, it's quite a big topic. Paraphilias and Schadenfreude. And Schadenfreude is when the perpetrator enjoys inflicting pain or watching people, you know, having pain inflicted on them. So that goes hand in hand with paraphilias as well. So that's Schadenfreude. And envy, there's another one. But it all sort of connects. Everything connects, and it makes them that one. I'm trying not to use. I'm trying to use quite a healthy word, if that makes sense. Let's just say that it makes that whole person that personality disorder type and abuser. So, but yeah, it's all definitely connected. Yeah, that's my opinion.
And of course, they're not going to want normal, healthy sex, are they? They're going to want not so normal sex. They're going to want it so that it's, you know, that it's not your making love type of sex where it is consensual. That's not going to fulfill their needs.
And their need is exactly the opposite to that. They have the issue. Well, going back to Schadenfreude, they enjoy inflicting pain of any sort, emotional, physical, whatever it is. You know, so no, they're not going to really enjoy love. You know.
So I guess it begs the question: do men or people who have this condition or these tendencies, then more often you're going to see examples of rape? I'm asking the
I
question.
think so.
I would think
believe
so.
so. Yeah, I believe so.
I mean, when
And
you
that's
only get turned on by um, watching your partner huddle and be afraid or cry, and that's what kind of gets you off, then I would think that there are probably lots of instances of rape in that individual's relationships.
Yeah, yeah, good point there, Anne. Very, very good point.
Yeah.
I wonder how prevalent paraphilia is. Did you see any stats that talked about that?
I just came across, I was just really researching it, and I thought, oh, right, the paraphilias, and there's all different names for each part, and they all sort of interconnect. And but I'm not sure if it's in the DMSN, oh God, I'm saying it all wrong, aren't I? The book. But yeah, I think it was in there, or they're going to remove it. I'm not too sure. So obviously the professionals will know, but when I came across it made sense. A lot of this made sense. So it is a good idea for people to have a little look into it, because it will make sense, once they kind of start to understand what it's all about. But as I said, it's you've got the control and coercion and abuse going on outside of the intimate side, outside of the bedroom. But that same thing's going to be happening in the bedroom, but it's going to be rape, So people need to realise that it's going to be everywhere in every possible way that abuse is going to be happening. So, yeah.
And why we're having this discussion.
Exactly.
Yeah. So important to talk about, because, so many people, as much as they don't know, that they experienced rape or that it was technically rape, there were abuse. I mean, until you start studying and talking about what abuse is and what narcissistic abuse is, what domestic violence, is, until you really get educated on things or knowing that paraphilia is a thing and that it's out there, then you can start putting all the pieces together if you have been in an abusive situation. So I think that's another reason why it's so important just to talk about these things and learn as we go, because I'm sure there are lots of people listening to this now who've never heard of paraphilia. Maybe they've never heard of narcissistic abuse, or and maybe they've never talked about rape, and maybe one of these instances that we mentioned makes them think, and then they can go and talk to their therapist about it, or they can talk to a police officer about it. And so I think it's so important that we talk openly about these topics, that they're not taboo, and that we sort of take the veil off of some of these topics. So important.
I mean,
and I think,
oh, sorry. Go on, Karen.
Sorry. The only way you can heal it, I feel, is that once you know about it, once it's out there in the open, once you recognise it, once your awareness has been raised, that's when you can start healing from it.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely.
So it is about recognising and then take whatever steps you need to do. Go for it, Snetha.
And thank you, Karen. And I totally agree. It's recognising it, and it needs to be looked at seriously at the end of the day, and then it can be addressed, and your healing will begin. Absolutely agree there. But we just, I guess I'm speaking for all of us here, but we just want to highlight that when we're talking about this form of sexual abuse, rape, it's not light-hearted stuff. Like, this is a whole I don't know what to call it, like it's calculated, so they know in each and every possible way they're going to be breaking you down. So it's not like a one-off incident or a mistake, and also, sorry, just spinning off from what I said before, sometimes we could hear perpetrators saying, well, they didn't realise, they didn't know what they were doing, they were half asleep, or they were intoxicated, so the perpetrators will say that. But this is a serial perpetrator we're talking about, because mistakes and accidents can happen. But, are you remorseful like the perpetrator is? If somebody has done it by accident, are they remorseful? Are they sorry? Was it a serious mistake? We got those questions, of course we do. But when we're talking about intimate relationships, this sort of stuff that's happening in that toxic environment, it's hurtful, it's heartbreaking, it's destroying people's lives. That is straightforward abuse. It's calculated, and they know exactly what they're doing. Yeah, and they're not remorseful at all.
massively damaging.
Yes, yeah, soul crushing, you know, because
Yeah.
intimacy is so intimate at the end of the day, and with everything they do, it just destroys your soul. You know, that's why this abuse is so damaging. It's so damaging in that way, because it really does. It destroys people. However, there is support out there, and we're here to support as well. So you can recover. You can. You know, we believe in that.
There's one more example that the writer gave of non-consensual sex. Karen, do you want to take the last one, number 6?
Mm-hmm.
Number 6 is sex when the woman feels she has no choice. So giving in isn't the same as giving consent. When a woman feels that it's easier to give in to sex than to respect her own needs, she is being raped. So that means that she's doing what the husband wants, but it's not what she wants.
Yeah, exactly.
Just doesn't feel, she doesn't, it's not that she can even say no, because she just knows that she hasn't got a choice.
And that summarizes it very well with everything that we just spoke about. It's actually an ownership that partner has over her. Yeah, he owns her, so she can't give consent, because she doesn't even have that choice, really. You know, so yeah, that's the strongest one out of all. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I think it's heartbreaking, because I know that, you know, the three of us work with a lot of women who suffer, you know, from abuse. And I know of multiple women who have examples of every single one of these 6 steps in their relationship, or did. Thank goodness can say did. I just think that's heartbreaking. And so when you're in the middle of it and you're trying to survive and live, and you don't see a lot of these different examples for what they are only until later. So.
Yeah.
I'd heard that sex, you know, the rape by an intimate partner is far worse. Not that any rape is going to ever be good, but worse than if it was a stranger, so to speak, because you trust that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not
well, I suppose we
to
should.
be that. Yeah. Sorry.
I suppose we should say, so there may be some people watching this and they see things that, you know, spark concern, you know, in their own relationship. So I'd say, you know, get some help, talk to people. You know, we will help you. You know, if you want to put a message or contact us and let us know, we'll try to give you some of the 800, the hotline numbers, you know, in the US and in the UK that you could call. But, you know, I'd encourage people to talk to therapists, talk to your police. If you really, and yeah, especially if you are listening to this and you realize you were raped, or, you know, a victim of sexual assault of some sort, you know, go talk to your police. You know, that's a great line of defense. I know a lot. I know many women who didn't realize that they were raped until they talked to a therapist or a police officer. So, you know, get out there and talk to people. We certainly are a support team, but we're not, you know, we're not therapists and we're not police officers. So we can't tell you what the law is in every, you know, exactly where you are located, but we can help get you the resources that you need. So, but the first step is talking about it.
And also that just that it comes under the domestic violence or domestic abuse umbrella. So sexual violence or sexual assault comes under domestic violence. So you can get in contact with your local domestic DA or domestic violence centre and speak to them, as well as the national helplines. You can ring and speak to somebody. So don't feel that you're alone, because you're definitely not alone.
There's also, like in the UK, you've got the Forced Marriage Unit as well, and other organisations that support people who have been victimised to being forced into marriage. So you can imagine the type of abuse that unfortunately they're faced with, and sexual abuse is a big part of it too. So yeah, there is support out there, definitely.
you've been forced into a marriage, it's like the chances are you're having sex against your will.
Yeah, very high chances.
Yeah.
Well, I know that I can speak for the three of us that we send love out to everyone who's listening to this, and we are there for you. And so reach out to us if we can help in any way. But the important thing is just to start this discussion and have this roundtable discussion about this very difficult topic. We're going to be having other roundtable discussions. So stay in touch with us. But anyway, comment below and let us know if you have any thoughts about anything that we said. So we encourage that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us, and yeah, thanks for organising for all of us, and well done.
Yeah.
And
All right.
thank you, ladies. My love goes to you all. Take care.